I've cooked over 9,000 meals since I started working out. This is my step-by-step logical guide to preparing a lot of food fast. For context, this is how I meal prep personally. And so in 2 hours, I can meal prep 14 meals. How do I do this step by step? Well, I'm gonna start at the very beginning, assuming that you don't know what to buy and you have no idea what to cook. The first step is to choose. Choose what foods you want to eat. Now, in my meal prep, I will typically include these 4 things. You want to have foods that are high calorie, aren't filling, and taste good. And so I have chicken thighs, some sort of beef, either rice or pasta, one of the two, and then I'll have some frozen vegetables. That could be broccoli, peas, carrots, corn, green peppers, whatever. Chicken, beef, rice or pasta, and frozen vegetables. These are the foods that I know each week I'm going to have. And I personally eat 5 meals a day. If I'm cooking 14 meals, that's 2 meals for every day of the week. And so 2 out of my 5 meals come directly from meal prep. Now I know which foods I'm going to purchase, but how much of each food do I get? Well, that depends on you. My meal preps typically are between 800 to 900 calories. I'd have to get a certain amount of each food to total 800 to 900 calories. Typically, I will do 100 grams of chicken thighs, cooked, I'm talking cooked, 100 grams of sirloin this week, 400 grams of cooked pasta, and 100 grams of frozen broccoli. Now, I know from personal experience, I'll put the calorie tracking screenshot up here, but I know these 4 things, their calories end up at a little over 900. I think it's like 930 or something like that. So we'll put 930 right there. If I know this is the amount of food that I will be eating every single meal, then I know I can multiply each of these things by 14 because we're eating 14 meals. This would be 1.4 kg of cooked chicken thighs, 1.4 kg of cooked sirloin, 5.6 kg of cooked pasta, and 1.4 kg of frozen broccoli. Now, these are the cooked numbers, 1.4, 1.4, 5.6, and 1.4. That's the cooked amount of food that I'm eating on my meal prep for the 14 meals. Now, if you're cooking 5 meals a week, 10 meals a week, 20 meals a week on meal prep, these numbers are gonna be different for you. But you can follow this by weighing out the amount of food you'll be eating per meal and then multiplying that by the amount of meals you're eating. So these are the numbers that are cooked, except I'm not buying 1.4 kg of cooked chicken thighs, right? I have to cook it myself. And so I have to buy it raw. How much of each amount do I buy? Fabulous question to ask. Given our cooked numbers right here, I'm going to turn the arrow backwards and calculate how much of each food in their raw form do I buy at the grocery store. Through trial and error, experience, and science, I've found that meats and frozen vegetables lose weight when they're being cooked. The reasoning for this is that they are retaining water, that they have fat in them, that gets cooked, that gets melted, that gets drained out. And so the starting weight, the raw weight, is always going to be more than the cooked weight. And so if we're buying meats and frozen vegetables, we have to buy more of these than what we plan to cook. How much more do we buy? Well, I've found that chicken thighs will lose, on average, between 25 and 30% of their weight throughout the cooking process. Beef is about the same, depending on how lean it is. Frozen vegetables, I've found, lose about 10 to 15% of their weight. And so each of these things will weigh less once they are cooked than they did when they were raw. So we have to buy more of them. How much more do we buy? Let's take the upper range. Let's say we lose 30% on our chicken thighs, we lose 30% on our beef, and we lose 15% on our frozen veggies. All we have to do is multiply this by this number expressed as a decimal. So in this case, it would be 1.4 times 0.3. 1.4 times 0.3, because we're losing an estimated 30% of the weight in the cooking process, this comes out to 0.42. And what we do with the 0.42 is we add it on to the amount of weight that we'll end up with when we're done cooking. This will tell us exactly how much food we need to buy when it's raw. So 0.42 plus 1.4 is 1.82 kg. So to get my 100 grams of chicken thighs for 14 meals, I have to buy 1.82 kg per week. If we're using the same numbers for beef, we have 100 grams of cooked beef per meal. We're losing 30% in the process, and the amount of total weight we have is the same as this. It will be the same result. Looking at our frozen vegetables, we have 15% loss during the cooking process. we have 1.4 kg. And so what we'll do is multiply 1.4 times 0.15, and that comes out to 0.21. So we just add it on and we end up with 1.61 kg of frozen vegetables. Why did I not calculate the rice or the pasta? Why did I leave this out? The reason I did that is because with meats and frozen vegetables, like I said, they're going to lose weight. But any foods that you cook with water, the water is going to get attracted to that food. And so things that are boiled, like rice or pasta, are going to gain weight. With the raw meats and the frozen vegetables, you had to buy more food. You had to buy more raw food to end up with less cooked food. In the case of gaining foods, you will have to buy less raw food to get more cooked food. So we know we have 5.6 kg here. How much do each of these foods gain so we know how much raw to buy? I found that white rice triples in size. So if you have 45 grams of raw white rice, of dry rice, when you cook it, you end up with 135 grams cooked. And so it triples in size. Pasta will 2.35x. Now in this meal prep tutorial, I will be using pasta as my choice. What's the calculation I have to make with this 2.35x and this 5.6 kg? Well, we know that the cooked amount is going to be more than the raw amount. And so we don't multiply like we did in the other case scenario. We're actually going to divide it. So I have 5,600 grams, which is 5.6 kg, and I'm going to divide it by 2.35. That's it. And that comes out to 2.38 kg dry, or you can go 2.4, you can round up. I think it's always a little better to buy a little extra when you're doing grocery shopping. So we buy 2.4 kg, 1.82 kg of chicken thighs, same for beef, 2.4 kg for pasta, and 1.61 kg of frozen broccoli. You can do this calculation for the amount of food that you want to eat. I already know the amount of cooked food that I want in each of my meal prep containers. That's why I'm able to calculate this. And so you could follow the same exact formula, the exact same foods, the exact same calculations if you want to. I have no problem with that. This is just what I buy personally for myself. So now we know the groceries that we have to buy. Here's every single appliance that I use. And I'll separate them by things that you need to cook the food with, things you need to clean the counters or the equipment with, and what to store the food inside of. So I'm going to start with the appliances that you need to cook the food. Ideally, you want to have pots. Start with some pots, right? We're boiling water. If we're cooking foods, we don't want liquids, water, grease splashing out of them. If you have a pan's pretty flat. And so we want to have pots. Ideally, we want to have multiple pots. Between 1 and 3 works pretty well. I have 2 personally, and it works great for me. Next, we have a food scale. This is to weigh out the food so we know how much food is going into each container and how much food we're using from our batch that we bought, right? We don't have unlimited food, so we have to be able to separate them evenly for each meal. A food scale will tell you exactly how much food is being taken out or how much food is being put in to a container. Next, I want to have a scoop or a ladle, something that you can mix around anything that's boiling that you can flip meat with. If you have a spatula, that works great as well. And you can also scoop the pasta, the rice out of the pot once it's done. Of course, you want to have a stove, something to heat up the food with. Ideally, you want to have a 2-element heated stovetop so you can have multiple pots on at once. That makes it go by faster. If you only have one, that's not a big deal. It just takes longer because you have to finish the first pot and then do the second pot after. But if you have 2, you can do 2 at once, which is nice. Finally, I use a thermometer. That way I can measure the temperature of the meat. So every single meat has its own temperature range for what's deemed to be safe to eat. And so chicken, off the top of my head, I know is 165 degrees Fahrenheit. If your chicken is cooked way below, if it's like 140, when you check it, that's not safe. And sometimes you can't always eyeball it and guess how warm it is inside of the chicken if it's cooked or not. So I think it's just better to have a thermometer stick. They're like $10. Next, the appliances we use to clean, right? We can't leave our meal prep up to our mom to clean. So we got to clean all of our appliances, any messes we make. I'm going to show you how to do that. I want to start with a hard bristle brush. The reason why I don't have like a soft washcloth or anything is because some of the food gets burnt on there and it gets stuck, and it's pretty hard to get off if you have like some soft microfiber cloth. So I get a hard brush, soap, and water, and that takes off 95% of the dirt or the burnt on food. And if I have any raw meats that are hanging around, if I drop raw meat on the floor or on the counter, sometimes soap and water might not do the trick. So I get a Lysol spray or wipe, some sort of disinfectant to take it off. This is pretty simple. Once the food is cooked, what do we store it inside of? Now, obviously, we're gonna have to put it in some sort of container. And so the amount of meals that you end up deciding to cook, the amount of containers you will choose to subsequently buy. If I'm cooking 14 meals, probably smart for me to have 14 containers. In fact, I might actually get an extra one in case I have food left over. But if you're calculating your food properly, you know how much to buy, this probably won't happen. So we know we have containers. I actually get sticky notes. I write it on the sticky note and I stick it to the container because I want to know how much of each food is in that container so that once I track my calories for that meal, I know exactly how much food's in there. This is something I personally do. I highly recommend it if you're tracking calories. Now these meals, these containers have to go in somewhere. And so you have to have a fridge. Hopefully you have a fridge where you live. If you're cooking so much food that it's going to be in the fridge for more than 5 days, let's just say you're cooking 14 meals, you probably wouldn't want to put all 14 in the fridge. Why? Because most foods start to grow bacteria exponentially past the 5-day mark, especially meats and vegetables. So if you cook it on Sunday and you plan to leave those foods in the fridge by next Saturday, I'd put the meals you plan to eat on Friday and Saturday in the freezer and then just pull them out before. A general rule of thumb is that once you put them in the freezer, you can't take them out, let them thaw, and then put them back in the freezer. So when you plan to eat them, take them out of the freezer and eat them as soon as possible, within a few days of pulling them out. All the appliances that you'd ever need to cook, to clean, and to store your meal prep. Before I move on to step 4, which is cook, I actually have one appliance that I'd highly, highly recommend you get. And that is a crock pot, a slow cooker. Now, I used to be someone who was really focused on cooking with pots and pans and stovetops because I wanted something that applies to everybody because pretty much every house has pots, pans, and stovetops. But I realized upon using the crock pot and slow cooker, my gosh, I save so much time. And so all I do is just toss the meat or pasta or rice. It cooks really everything. You just toss it in the morning, let it sit for the entire day, and then it's done. You don't have to do anything to it. There's no attention. All you have to do is dump the meat in, add your seasoning, add a little bit of water, and then you're good to go. So you could do this, and it takes whatever, 3 to 4 hours if you're setting it on high heat, or 7 to 8 hours for low heat. And you can just leave it there. You don't even have to touch it, which is awesome. So that's my secret. I'll put a star next to it. That's my secret weapon for meal prep recently. And if you're someone who's doing a lot of work, if you're very busy, you have a lot on the go, I'd highly recommend things that do jobs for you passively. You don't have to give this any attention. Would highly recommend a crock pot. But let's just say you don't have one. What do you do? Now I'm gonna have what we need to cook on a bit of a spectrum. What could be done first to last in the meal prep process. So it takes me, just for reference, it takes me about 2 hours to meal prep all 14 meals to get them cooked, cleaned, and packaged. So what comes first in this 2-hour process? Well, I'd say anything that can be done passively, meaning you do it once and you don't have to give it any attention, like the crock pot, or if you're cooking with pots, boiling pasta, boiling rice. All you have to do is just boil the water and toss the stuff in, and then you could do other stuff in between. So I'd get this ready first, your pasta, your rice, your carbs, whatever. As this is boiling, the next step that I would take is that I would add my frozen veggies to my containers. Remember that we are tracking the amount of food with our food scale and our sticky notes. While this is still boiling up, chop up your meat if you need to. If you're buying ground meat, then you can just toss it right in the pot and cook it. But if you're buying chicken thighs, if you're buying a steak, maybe you want to season it, maybe you want to cut it up and get it ready. By the time this pasta is done boiling and cooking, it'll be pretty much done. You'll have your frozen veggies good to go. Your meat will be cooking. And as your meat is cooking, your pasta and rice will be ready. And after you've added your pasta to all your containers, then your meat will be done. So I'll put meat last. And after all this is done, obviously you got to clean it. Now, one more thing that I'll say, if we're doing all this stuff right and we're tracking everything that goes into containers, if you're gonna add a sauce to your meal prep, I just recommend adding that sauce in the time you plan to eat the meal. So I wouldn't add sauce to the 14 meals and then put them in the fridge. Why? Because they can attract bacteria faster than really anything else. And so that sauce is gonna get spoiled and moldy very quickly. So just add the sauce when you plan to eat the meal. That is fundamentally how you meal prep. And so I'll break the steps down one more time. First, you want to pick and choose the foods that you plan to meal prep. And you have to ask yourself, are these foods going to benefit me and my goals? Are they going to help me save time? Are they easy to chew? Are they high calorie? Do they make me feel not full? Do I like eating these foods, right? You have to ask yourself these questions. The chicken, beef, pasta, and veggies, those are all foods that I like, and they check all of those boxes. So for me, that works well. The next step is to calculate the amount of food I need to purchase and then buy that food. You have to go to the grocery store and purchase these things. You could use the math that we talked about earlier, the conversions. Remember, meats and vegetables are going to lose weight. Rice and pasta are going to gain weight. And so you can use those conversions for whatever you choose to eat. But you have to calculate it and buy it. That way you buy the right amount. Step number 3, the third step is to cook the food, right? We bought the foods, we calculated the amount we needed, now we gotta cook it. And I think the best way to go about it is to prioritize things that are passive first, so I'll put P there. And then as you move on, you'll be able to do other things while this one thing is cooking. Now, in most cases, it's going to be your pasta, your rice, or if you have a crock pot slow cooker, you can toss your meat in there as well. And so set this thing up first. That way you can do all these other things while this is cooking. And by the time this is done, then you will have all of these things done as well. The final step is to track the foods in every container using our food scale and the sticky notes. Any dirty dishes, utensils, food that's spilt, we're gonna clean that all up, and then we're gonna store it in the fridge or the freezer if we don't plan to eat that meal for more than 5 days. But choose the foods. Do they benefit you, your time, your schedule, your goals? Calculate how much you need, buy that amount, cook it, prioritize passive meals first, and then track, clean, store anything in the freezer beyond 5 days. That is it. That is meal prepping.